there's a false understanding in place, and it presumes that all non-form consciousness, people who have died,
Mhm,
right, are demonic,
mhm,
right? So now, first of all, I mean, education and a more enlightened and experienced and ethical source of information um, needs to be in place, right? Not all non-form consciousness is demonic, right?
mhm. Yeah.
The demonic has never been human, first of all. And souls that have transitioned, they vibrate so differently than earthbound spirits or ghosts,
Mm,
right? As we would call them. And even the lowest of the low in that category of energy is not demonic.
mm,
Um, and I have come into thankfully, I've never come into anything demonic, to
mhm,
be honest. And nor do I ever want to. I would never go out even searching for that professionally.
mhm.
But I have experienced that low, malicious, angry, hateful, um, that kind of energy,
Mm.
and and even that's not demonic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're sitting down with a brand new guest to talk about some brand new things. Her name is Tina Hardt, and along with Carrie Parrish, she put together an amazing tool called the Beloved Dead, an oracle for divine ancestral wisdom. And so, Tina, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for making time for us. Thank you for your work. I've got a lot of questions.
Wow, let's let her rip.
Let her rip. Just dive right in. So first thing is first, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself for our listeners who maybe are not familiar with you, are not familiar with your work? Who is Tina Hart? What do we need to know about you?
I think psychologists have been working on that one for quite a while.
Right. We'll bring them on and we'll ask them.
So, but in a nutshell,
Right.
I'm a writer, I'm a ghostwriter. I'm also a messenger. I give people helpful messages. So I'm a diviner, and I sit in psychic mediumship circles.
So what do you believe? The big question. What do you believe about the afterlife? Because a lot of our listeners, myself, and we'll talk more about this in a little while, but they come from I come from a very evangelical background where it's very fundamentalist, very conservative, and not in those waters anymore, but those are like where my roots are. So growing up, it was all about, you got to believe the right things or you're going to go to hell. You believe the right things and you go to heaven. It's like those two places. So I think a lot of our listeners they're deconstructing, so to speak, from that sort of mindset. But one of the questions I love to ask people who come on the show, especially someone like yourself who is doing the work you're doing, is what do you believe about the afterlife? We close our eyes here for the last time, so to speak. What happens next?
First of all, what you first explained, and we
Hmm.
can get into that later. I used to play billiards, and I was around the billiard store for quite a while. And as a
Hmm.
Canadian, I had never really come into contact with that fundamentalist point of view. And
Hmm.
so I met a few of these people. So I under, I have a good idea of how difficult sometimes it can be
Hmm.
to deconstruct from that. But
Yeah.
we can get into that a little bit later.
Hmm.
Personally, I'm going to completely rip off Einstein here because I think he said the best thing. He said souls were souls dressed up in sacred biochemical garments.
Hmm.
And I believe that when our containers break and we have free will, so we will either choose to go home and transition, or we'll stay earthbound and just bug the living hell out of the living.
I have a list of people I'd like to bug if I'm going to be hanging out here. Yeah,
It's
I've been
different.
thinking, yeah, right. Yeah, I've been thinking my father, I think I mentioned the emails, but my father passed away in March, and so I've been doing a lot of thinking about this sort of question, especially deconstructing what I used to believe. Like, I feel like I gave up on those beliefs a while ago, but I never really reconstructed anything in its place. It's been kind of just like fuzzy and I don't really know. But then when my father passed away, I was like, well, I want to think more about this because this is a question that really matters to me. And my daughter, she's sick. She's asking different questions. I was like, what do I really believe about this? So I was doing some reading in some like the Buddhist tradition. And I came across this idea of like the ocean and the waves, right? And how like the ocean, the ocean's just beautiful, huge body of water, and out of the ocean arise these waves that are beautiful and they're majestic and they do their thing, and you're like, ooh, oh, that's amazing. But then it crashes into a rock or into the beach, and it dissolves back into the ocean. It doesn't cease to be necessarily; it's still there. It just kind of falls back into the ocean. So I've been thinking about that in terms of like our lives and how, perhaps we're just like waves that come up out of the ocean for 50, 60, 70, 80 years. And it's beautiful, it's majestic. There's highs and there's lows, but then eventually we crash upon a rock, we crash upon the beach, my father crashed upon cancer. Some people crash upon old age or different things like that. And we fall back into that ocean of the divine. And what happens after that, whether we have different choices or decisions to make or whatever it might be, but it gave me some comfort to think that maybe we don't cease to exist, but we just manifest in a different form than we are right now.
I think sometimes it's important not to think that we have all the answers, because
Yes,
that we have all the answers, that we stop asking questions.
that's right.
And usually our understanding of this body of information comes from constantly asking questions and then being still enough to be there for the information
Hmm.
which comes through. And that's a beautiful, serene image that
Mm,
you presented, and sitting sitting in these circles and actually uh, connecting with non-form consciousness is certainly given me a brand new perspective, and it has certainly let me know that consciousness does survive death. It survives death. It is different, but
yeah,
it's
I love that. And I love that. I love what you said about mystery because I think, again, like coming from my background, it was all about having the answers. I
yeah.
read every book on theology I could read. You could ask
Wow.
me a question, I could defend it. I had all the answers because that's just the world we came in. There's a verse in the Bible that says, like, be prepared to give an answer, for your beliefs kind of thing. And so that was always drilled into my head that if somebody asks you a question about life, about death, about God, whatever, you need to have an answer and you need to have your verses to back it up. And so I've let go of that mindset, but that hardwiring is still in my brain very often. And so even in questions like this, I can find myself kind of reverting back to that old approach of I have to find the answer. And so I'll dig into this tradition, that tradition. This makes more sense, that makes less sense, and try to put together some kind of system in my head for what happens. But like you said, there's mystery in it. And I think that's the beauty of it. And that's what I'm finding myself embracing now is more of that mystical mindset of, I don't know, I can hold loosely to all of these ideas because I think they're all very interesting. But at the end of the day, I don't really know what happened. I just believe that something happens. And I have to believe if the universe, I believe the universe is good. I believe that God or the divine is a being of love. So I have to believe that whatever the case may be, will fall back into being taken care of, whatever that might look like.
Sometimes too, the answers are between the lines,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it takes a certain mindful practice to be still enough to, but it's important to be a seeker. It's
Yeah.
a seeker.
That's right.
Part of the joy. It's the part of the joy of being alive. I have a story. This is not
Sure.
supposed to have been. We're going.
Tell me, I like stories.
Okay, so my parents were Catholic. I mean,
Mhm.
Catholic. My grandmother was practicing, just beautiful woman, and truly used her religion to become a better person.
Mhm.
My parents, they just wanted me to go to Sunday school,
Mm.
possibly because it was babysitting.
Just can't get
Or
rid of you for a little while.
So I remember I went one day and they gave me a pamphlet,
Mhm.
and it was a little book, and it was it was a little boy who was there. You could see the church in the background and everyone was in service, and this little boy was outside. There was a brick wall and he was playing alleys on a Sunday. He was outside of the church playing alleys, and there were these horrific demons
Mm.
around him. I mean, they looked like something right out of a Hieronymus Bosch painting, and they were
Mm.
terrifying,
Mm.
really terrifying. And I looked at this, and even when I was young, I looked at this and thought, this isn't right. Like, first of all, I could see myself like playing alleys, there's the shadow. I could also see myself in the church, right?
Mhm.
But why would you have to resort if uh, faith why would a faith have to resort to propaganda? So there becomes the seeding of the terror.
Mm.
And make no mistake, if you're not in here doing what we expect you to do on a Sunday at this time, then you are going to hell,
That's right. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And the result of that, it is an indoctrination. It is a seeding,
Yep.
and that seeding hides like a pesky squatter in our psyche, in our memories, just waiting for the right trigger to be, to wreak havoc. And so
Yeah.
I don't know why that story came to mind, but it did. But even at a younger age, I didn't end
Mm.
up going. Sorry for that, but I have done lots of other good things.
So what do you say to the person who, we're getting into this conversation about the dead, what happens when we die? We'll talk about in a minute, communicating with these souls or these spirits. Like, what do you say to the person who they were brought up in that fundamentalist place where they were told all this stuff is off limits? Because for me, I was told, this is the doorway to Satan. Open, any kind of communication, anything, even dabbling in those waters with the dead is going to open you up to all sorts of things. Like somebody who's trying to let go of that mentality, they're interested in this topic. Maybe they're going to pick up these cards that we're going to talk about in a minute. Like, what are some ways somebody can try to drop their guard a little bit? Have you given any thought to that kind of thing?
Oh yes. Um, well, again, there's some key words there.
Hmm.
There is the unmistakable presence of opinions and beliefs and indoctrination
Hmm.
has led to this sort of the earth is flat mindset.
Yeah.
And there is a little bit, it takes a lot of energy, a lot of sort of effort to unpack this response. And part of me is, I don't even know how this is even a reasonable response because, first of all, there's a false understanding in place, and it presumes that all non-form consciousness, people who have died,
Hmm.
right, are demonic,
Hmm.
right? So now, first of all, I mean, education and a more enlightened and experienced and ethical source of information um, needs to be in place, right? Not all non-form consciousness is demonic, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
The demonic has never been human, first of all. And souls that have transitioned, they vibrate so differently than earthbound spirits or ghosts,
Mm.
right? As we would call them. And even the lowest of the low in that category of energy is not demonic.
Mm.
Um, and I have come into thankfully, I've never come into anything demonic, to
Hmm.
be honest. And nor do I ever want to. I would never go out even searching for that professionally.
Hmm.
But I have experienced that low, malicious, angry, hateful. that kind of energy,
mm,
and and even that's not demonic.
mm,
So the problem is that there is a fear body in place here,
mhm.
and you can't approach this work with fear.
Yeah. I think when I first got the deck, which I'm gonna hold up for our listeners who are watching on the video, but when I first got it, I was like, my inner Christian soldier was like, "Oh my god, what are you doing?" You know, like it was so much fear and so much anxiety. And then I opened up the book and I read like the first couple pages. I'm like, all right, this doesn't seem like it's quite as scary as maybe I've been taught that it is. And I started to look at the images on the cards and I started to really feel like I feel some sort of peace coming over me a little bit. And so then I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to read the book. I'm going to read some of the book. And I saw, you know, about like the throne card where you put that card in front of you and you kind of put a picture of your loved one on that thing and you kind of invite that person. I'm like, okay, so thinking like about my dad, like my dad just passed away, and I just started thinking about him and getting a picture in my mind of him sitting in his recliner at their house and just tried to picture that and just invite him to come. And I was like, okay, this doesn't seem as threatening as it did when I was sitting in the classroom being told about all these different things. So I think that once I let go of some of that fear, like you said, there was a lot more clarity that came into my mind revolving this topic around this topic and kind of what it's all about.
It's that control using fear that never leads to anything good.
Yeah.
That doesn't, I don't know, that doesn't help like a human being evolve.
Yeah.
So first of all, the vibration of love does not feel like that.
Hmm.
So that's something I would automatically say that that is where our loyalty has to go. We
Yeah.
ask ourselves, how does our heart feel here?
Yeah.
Right? Are we afraid of something, it's been instilled,
Yeah.
right? And just ask, is this the seeding at play, or is this something genuinely, authentically love based
Yeah.
rather than fear based?
Yeah.
But the beloved dead, the work that we did. Now, the word, I, I don't think I should say this, but I do, right? Originally, we called it the spirit oracle, but then
Mm.
we went with the word beloved dead. Dead can be, as a takeaway, dead can be a frightening word
Hmm.
on a lot of levels. But let's just take that out of the equation, focus on the beloved part, right?
Hmm.
Because the whole thing about the beloved dead and the way that I see this is that they're an elite special task force of ancestors. And let's think about the math of ancestry for a second, right? We
Hmm.
have two parents, four grandparents, 16 great grandparents, 32, 64. All of those souls stand behind us.
Mm.
So this elite special task force of ancestors, their superpowers are that they've lived, they've experienced life,
Hmm.
they've experienced heartbreak, they've experienced joy, the challenges, and they have accumulated wisdom. And now that they've passed on, they are blessed with this more enlightened perspective on things that we, here
Hmm.
in the land of form are still dealing with. And
Yeah.
every single one of these cards is like a portal into that specific wisdom.
Mm.
They're here to help. They're
Mm.
here
Yeah. I
because
love
they were
that.
human. They were human too. They made mistakes.
Yep.
If you even think about what they had to go through, think about the females at the time that couldn't divorce and had abusive husbands, and they couldn't leave the house,
Yeah.
or so many other issues, and all of that stuff trickles down and stays in our epigenetic markers
Yeah.
and is still looking and seeking expression in choices that we make.
Yeah.
So this becomes less of I mean, it's a spiritual, but it becomes a highly useful psychological tool,
Mhm.
right? The beloved dead are here basically asking us to take a look at maybe where some limiting inherited patterns are,
Mhm.
things that we do, beliefs that come from beliefs or become from how we were raised,
Yep.
and it's not asking us to hate where we came from or blame or be resentful. It's asking us just to table these things so that we can make better choices, clear
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah.
That's what kind of tool this is.
Mm. Would you say then, I mean, our listeners are becoming more familiar with tarot because we've had some tarot readers come on the show and they've shared some different things, but a lot of the language that you're sharing, I think people can begin to see some overlaps into the world of tarot, because one of the kind of the myths that we debunked early on with tarot on the show was that, they're not meant to like predict the future, or they're not meant to, there doesn't have to be like this scary world of, you pull the death card and that means this horrible thing is about to happen to you or something like that, because there's so much baggage that those cards carry, thanks largely in part to the media and even like movies and different things like that. But I think when you peel back all those layers, what those cards really do is help you see things that maybe you're just not seeing in your life that's been there the whole time. You might look at a card and you might see, like the fool, and you might see him going on this journey, and you might see that he's taking his little bag with him, but he's leaving maybe the larger pieces of his baggage behind. That might awaken something and you're like, oh yes, and you might see something in your life that's been there the whole time. So when I hear you talk about these cards and our ancestors who are standing behind us, and you pull this card and maybe it's one of our ancestors speaking to us from their experience, and you might see, oh my goodness, like I never thought about this angle of this situation going on in my life, and can it just help you make a better decision or maybe a more confident step going forward into whatever it is that you were dealing with in your day.
Maybe they're saying, I'm so proud of you because quite frankly, I never made that decision. I chose this path and
Yeah.
see you choosing this path.
Yeah.
That also helps heal the ancestral line. But let's talk about that death card for an instant.
Yeah. Please.
There's another reason why that death card can be so frightening.
Mhm.
It's because there's no looking back. We're creatures of habit. We
Yeah.
don't like change. And with that card, it basically says that you are transitioning out of something.
Yeah.
There's part of you that will not be the same. And let's face it, fear is scary, and it's much easier for us sometimes to stay unhappy and to stay in, make the same mistakes over and over and over again. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't know, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that card is it shakes people out of their complacency.
Yeah.
That to me is more fright more frightening on an unconscious level,
Yeah.
than because he's holding the banner of the harvest.
Yeah.
He is, but he's saying, like you have to, whether you want to or not, you have to go through this
Mhm.
because there is victory and there is the harvest afterwards.
Mhm.
But it's just that journey. But we all have to go through those things in our life at times.
Yeah. And I think you see, I mean, it's just the way death comes in seasons, right? That's just the way that the world works. I mean, even where I live now, it's starting to get cold outside. The leaves are falling off the trees. Like there's a sense of a death, so to speak, has moved in, but there's a cycle, right? The spring will come, the summer will come. Things will look very different because everything grows a little bit, everything changes a little bit. But at the end of the day, that death does lead to some sort of new life. And I think that if we can look at that card and the cards that we maybe perceive as scary through that kind of a lens, I think it again helps drop the fear around it that we've all been told to pick up with it.
And what is it that we do when the weather starts getting cold? And what is it you feel like doing?
Bundle up, brew some hot chocolate. Yep.
It's a time to rest.
Yep. Exactly.
It's a time to go inside and explore and
Yep. That's right.
so it's always working with an energy as opposed to being in conflict with it and
Yeah.
arguing with it. That's the that's the key, I think.
That's right. All right. So somebody gets this deck and they take it home. What can they expect when they open up this box? And what is maybe a good practice to kind of get off on the right foot with this deck. Because again, for somebody, talk to us like we don't know anything. Because for me, I didn't know anything. Open up this box and know what I was getting into. So like, what can somebody expect? And then maybe I'll share a story that I have for you
Right.
that with the cards, and then maybe you can have some stories too. But first things first, somebody gets the deck, they peel off the plastic. What's next?
So now you, Carrie, my beloved partner, she's moved to Italy. So she's in transition. She's moved to Lucca, Italy. And if she were here, you guys would just love her. She's just like a ray of sunshine,
Hmm.
and she's wicked smart, as they
Hmm.
say in Boston, right? She's just
Wicked, right?
wicked smart. So there's a whole bunch of Carrie when you open that box.
Mm,
Now, first of all, it's very true. It's gonna feel like you're in an attic and you've discovered a box on the shelf, and you go to the box and you open it up, and it's like all kinds of Victorian cabinet cards and all kinds of these people who who belong to a different time in history.
mm,
And when you open it up, it's like suddenly, um, so it almost does feel like there's some magic that just comes out of the box, and you'll get to meet this team, the spirit team. You'll get to meet them one by one, and oh my gosh, they're chatty. They'll start talking to you. They'll start
mm.
saying things, and you understand. I think this deck is so very, very easy to become attuned with, and I think that's a lot because of what we kind of laid into the work
Yeah.
when we were building it. But you'll be like, okay, enough already.
Right. Quiet. That, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, for me, when one of the, I think I've used it. I've probably used it maybe like 15, 20 times since I've gotten it. So I try to use it maybe a couple times a week, and it's been
Wonderful.
I'm starting to get a little bit more comfortable with it. And I think there's a lot in there. Like in the book, there's a lot of different like spreads you can do, a lot of different kind of ideas for talking to the different, you know, souls or spirits on the spirit team. And for me, what I've been trying to do is, because not to overwhelm myself too much, is to kind of use it to really direct towards my father, because right now he's like the freshest in my mind. And so like we said earlier, in the deck, I have it here in front of me, but just so our YouTube people can see it, there's the spirit throne card, right? And I think in the book, like it talks about putting that card in front of you and then putting a picture of your loved one on it, kind of thing. So I've been doing that religiously a couple times a week, and kind of some stuff surrounding my father's passing. I haven't really even talked about this too much on the show, so I guess we'll just go there. Feels like the spirit is leading that way. So I it was a Saturday night, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and my mom had apparently called like 3 or 4 times before, starting at like 10 o'clock, but I was, for whatever reason, I had really bad allergies. I was fast asleep. I took a couple Benadryls that night, and I was just out cold. And
Yeah.
my wife, for whatever reason, she didn't hear the phone either. And so finally I heard it at 1 o'clock, and I saw there was like 4 missed calls. So I'm like, that's never good when you see a 1 o'clock in the morning phone call. So I said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" My mom said, "You have to come to the hospital like now." And I was like, okay, so I quick got my clothes on. I ran out the door, like a 30-minute drive there, and I got there. And when I walked in the room, my dad was not doing well at all. He was in a lot of pain. But yet his face lit up when he saw me, when he reached out to me, and I went over and I grabbed his hand, and I was there with them for a couple hours, I guess. And he was in a lot of pain, there was a lot of suffering, and they gave him some medicine to kind of calm him a little bit and help him, rest. And he passed away. And I was holding his hand when he took his last breath. And it was a traumatic experience. And like it was so much to process. And I went home with my mom. We had separate cars, so I followed her home. And on my way home, I was thinking to myself, like, I've never really grieved before, because
Mhm.
life in the church taught me you jam all your feelings away for everybody else, because you have a job to do. You've got to preach sermons, you've got to lead Bible studies, you've got to help people, your feelings are important, but they don't matter as much as everybody else. So it was like this martyrish thing to do, to kind of take one for the team. And so that's just the way I've always been. I've always just jammed my feelings away. I was driving home, like I don't remember the last time I cried. That's what I was really thinking. I was like, this just isn't a healthy way to process your grief. And so like I have to do it differently this time. And so I've really been doing my best to embrace that grief and those feelings when they come up. But anyway, so when I got this deck and I was talking to my dad about these things, I talk to my dad all the time. I'm just assuming he can hear me. And so, I'm talking to him and I said to him, like, that night was just an awful night, and I said, I felt so bad because I wasn't there when they called me at 10 o'clock. Like, there's a 4 hour gap, that I wasn't there. And like, what were you thinking, when I wasn't there? And I'm so sorry. And like all these different things were just coming to my mind. And I said, I hated to see you suffering. And like, I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that and all these different things. So the cards I pulled was just like crazy. Like, this is what got me. I was like, this has to, of all these cards, these are the two cards that I pulled. Like, it has to be my father speaking to me. So the cards I pulled were the as is card and the service card. And so the as is card is obviously just like the title is things are as they are, right? And like I felt like my dad always said that to me. Like this is the situation that we're in. Can't change it. Like this is where we're at, And so stop trying to hold on to the way you wish things should be or the way you think things should be and open up your hand so you can embrace like what is, because as different as it is, as much as you might not like it to be the way that it is the way that it is. And can we find some goodness in the death? The death card has come, kind of thing. Something old has passed away, but something new is on the horizon. And can you open your hands, to receive that thing? And so that's kind of the message I got with that card. But then the service card really struck me because, and it's what was written in the book. I'm not sure did if you wrote the book or you wrote it with Kate. Yeah, you wrote the book, so you already know where I'm going to go with it. But the service card towards the end of the little blurb,
Medical emergency.
yeah, it says when this card is validating a loved one or an individual, service can also reveal a passing that may have involved an accident or a sudden medical event where an urgent response and care are required. Your loved ones don't want you to hang on to any trauma involving the situation. They want you to know that they are good and whole, and they want only to tend to your heart in this time. And for me, that just like shook me to the core because I've literally been carrying around this invisible baggage of guilt that I was sleeping in those phone calls and that I missed all this stuff. And I felt like it was just, I really felt my dad's presence. I really felt a warmth come over me, like the hair on my arm stood up. And I felt like my dad was saying, I'm good. I was good there in that room that night. I was good and I'm good now. And now it's important to tend to your heart. And I'm here to help you take your steps forward in your life. And I'm not going anywhere. You just can't see me. And for whatever reason, all of that brought me so much comfort. And so I am a huge proponent of this deck and whatever way people use it, however it's used, I think it can bring a lot of healing in people's lives. So,
With the as is card, that is one of the active love cards too. And what that is also telling you is that the acceptance, right?
mhm,
First of all, you heard your father's voice, right? Say, just listen, there it is, right? There was nothing really, what that says is there was nothing you could have done. There it
mm,
is.
yeah,
Requires an acceptance because without that, you're carrying that trauma forward. You're carrying that trauma of the situation of how he passed forward.
mm,
And they don't they don't want that.
mm,
Had you been there 4 hours earlier, Glenn, what could you have done?
yeah,
You could have contributed to you might have contributed to his worries because now he has to watch. Do you know he has to watch his loved ones around him, and it's a battle for him
mm,
to let go and be at peace.
yeah,
And you were there, which is what matters.
mm,
And
yeah,
there are cases where people aren't there,
mhm,
and they forever hold that guilt.
Yeah.
But as you see, he's around you.
Yeah.
That was just that was just one event.
I
Certainly
hear
not
okay.
define the life and the love
Mm-hmm.
and the bond that you experienced with him.
Mm, yeah.
So just a
I'll hear his favorite songs come on the radio a lot, and it's funny, like, it's older
what are
songs,
they?
like Boston, that was one of his favorite bands, and, like, that it's not like common music played on the radio all the time, but literally after he passed away, for the first 3 months, I was walking through Home Depot, one of his favorite stores, and that song came on the radio randomly
Boston?
in Home Depot, and
Do you think it's just a little bit weird that I never call people wicked smart,
right.
right? I'm Californian
That's
and I said
right.
like the from Boston.
Yeah.
Just a
As soon as
little
you said that before, that's what I immediately thought of the band Boston because of my dad and this conversation we're gonna have. But I've heard that song so many times. Um, he loved hummingbirds and butterflies, and so there've been hummingbirds popping up here and there. A butterfly, I was walking with my daughter and my wife, back in the summer, and I had a cup of coffee in my hand, and my dad loved this coffee, and we were walking, and literally a butterfly came and rested on the
coffee.
cup, the coffee cup, and my wife was like, "It's not even flying away." I was like, "It's so weird." And then it flew and it sat on my shoulder right here while we were walking, and then my daughter even touched its wing, and then it flew away. But again, like, it's just those kinds of things that show me, like, man, there's so much mystery involved in it, but it's gotta be good, and it's gotta be so much more than the definitive black and white answers I was given as a kid.
So, what would you recommend to people? I mean, who would come from that perspective that any sort of opening up to this as a potential or possibility would be demonic, and they would be robbed of the experience, the experiences that you're having. What would you say to them?
Yeah. Oh, we're gonna turn the interview around now. I think that, it's like here we go. I
Talk
think
about
I think that I would say, like, especially on the podcast, people have been following for a long time. We've been embracing mystery in all sorts of different areas. Like, we talk about theological things, like, big things like atonement. We talk about the afterlife, we talk about heaven, we talk about different stories in the Bible. And a lot of the places that we land in those topics is, I don't know. I don't know. There's mystery involved, and that mystery is a good thing. And it opens up our imagination to explore and to wonder about God and the divine and all these different things. So I think if we can carry that same mindset and that same approach into this topic, I think that's just a natural progression for us because we're at 260 episodes of this podcast. We've been exploring a lot of topics. And so I think if we can realize that that same approach to those topics can be brought over to here, makes it seem less scary. And I also think that getting a deck like this is very helpful because, again, the guidebook is wonderful. There's so many different things in there that I think immediately can help you drop your guard a little bit because the way that you write about this topic in that book is a lot less scary than a lot of the things that I came across in my church upbringing and things like that. And again, it just makes you able to drop the guard. So I think there's that, but then also is take it slowly. Like, there's no reason to open up the deck and you have to think of what your 30 ancestors, and like, communicate with all these different things or whatever. Like, just get, like I said, that card of the throne card, and just get somebody in your mind that you miss. Maybe somebody who passed away that you love, that you miss. You wish that they were still here in the flesh and you could have coffee with them, whatever. Get that person in your mind and put their picture down. Just ask them a question and pull a card and see what it says. It might have nothing. You might be like, what the heck does this even mean? I don't know. But it might, like me, like that was the first card I pulled was those cards. And I was immediately like, I needed to hear that. And it has to be my dad because of all these cards. Like, it's not like it's a small deck. There's a lot of cards in there. Of all the cards I could have pulled, those
oh,
were the two that I pulled. And that has to say something to me. And again, that dropped my guard as well to go into this a little bit more. And I think we have Last thing I'll say is I think we have a lot of assumptions around this topic. And I think that we can also, our listeners, we've learned that we have a lot of assumptions about a lot of topics that we've covered on the show because we've been told certain things. This is the way that it is. We've been told not to question it. And now that we're asking questions and we're pulling at these different strings, we're poking holes in different things, we're discovering that a lot of the things that we were told are very black and white are actually very colorful. There's actually quite a spectrum of ways to think about these different things. And so I think that when it comes to this topic, again, we've been told it's very black and white. But if we can take that colorful approach to this, just as we've taken it to topics of heaven and hell and atonement and theology and the Bible and inerrancy and all these different things, I think we can find a level of comfort in all of this.
Too, another way of thinking too is like, what if these are all aspects of you,
Mm,
right? You're familiar with the process of individuation?
yeah.
So that basically is the process of developing our own individuality
Hmm.
that's separate from the emotions, the thinking, the behavior,
Yep.
right? Friends, family, peers. And our wellness really depends on that evolution, that great work,
Mm,
right? That evolution to this state of personal freedom. So these cards also help you break through those limiting patterns. It
yeah.
opens up a dialogue, not only right to, I mean, if that is the intention, if you want to work, do you
Hmm.
know what I mean? If you want to do the psychic work, it will definitely help you. But
Hmm.
if you want to just open up a dialogue with your higher self or your unconscious,
Yeah.
this is a fantastic way to do it.
Yeah. I've shared this on the show before, but growing up in the place that I did, I've always had this I've always had this feeling of like insecurity growing up, like I'm not good enough. I have nothing good to say, like nobody's going to want to hear me. And so that's something I've always struggled with and wrestled with. And when I was in school, coming from the background I did, it was a very charismatic kind of place. We did a lot of talking about the demonic realm and things like that. And I was always told that that voice inside is a demon and it needs
Mhm.
to be cast out of you. So I can't tell you like how many literal deliverance sessions I've been through. Like people anointed my head with oil, telling
Mhm.
this thing to come out of me in the name of Jesus, all these different things. And for a
Yeah.
while, it would always get better, but then it would like a month later, it's right there back again. And
So let's
I was told,
do.
well, it's because you're not reading your Bible enough. You're not praying enough. You're not. So again, it's my fault again. Now the voice just gets even stronger. And so I had a friend though who said to me, recently, he's one of my friends, he's like a mentor to me. He said, "What if that's not a demon, but what if that's your inner child? What if that's just part of you who is chattering back to you the things that he heard growing up? Was there somebody in your life that told you or made you feel like you weren't good enough?" I said, "Yeah, for sure, a very prominent figure in my life." And they said, "Well, that
Favor,
voice."
go pick a card right now. Let's pick a card. Go to the
Okay.
deck.
Yep.
Let's pick a card.
Okay. Let's do it. Let's see what we got.
Mhm. So sometimes too, let me just tell you at this stage, what I would do, yeah, interesting. What I would do sometimes if I were going to do this work is I
Yeah.
would set the spirit throne card and I would remove the 10 active love cards, remove
Mhm.
them to the side. This is
Mhm.
just what I've learned. When you're working on a deck, it's theoretical and then you
Sure.
take it to trenches and you learn
Sure.
things that
Sure.
are not in the book.
Yeah.
But I would pull the 10 active love cards out
Hmm.
and put them face down.
Hmm.
So what we're doing is we're asking this person basically to come and sit in that spirit throne. So
Hmm.
you've pulled him, which is interesting because um yeah, that's right.
Hmm.
So do you have the 10 active love cards
I
that
do.
are
They're separate over here.
separate? Okay, perfect. Okay, so now how do you understand how do you understand that voice there?
That looks to me to be, I mean, when I look at that card, I think of obviously it's a religious figure. He's got his white collar on, he's got a big cross hanging down. That feels like the religious soldier that I grew up with. But the feeling I get from it is that that voice is maybe bigger, is not as black and white perhaps as you were led to believe that it is. That's kind of what I'm hearing in the card, is that there's a bigger scope than what I've been told.
With that card,
Mhm.
we're trying to identify where this insecurity came from, right?
Mhm.
So where that seeding came from.
Ah,
So with that card comes either the concept of a dogma, an institution,
yeah.
a right? So to are you able to identify, if you just look at that card, can you hear something back? Or what were you told? In other words, what were you told to
Ah,
do, didn't want to
yes, yes,
do,
yes.
or what
Yeah.
were you prohibited from doing that you did want to do that was authentic? So how does that how does that relate to that card you just pulled?
Yeah, so I went to a private Christian school from the 4th through 12th grades. So from just as a child, I was getting the message of like original sin, that you're born sinful, that right away, right off the bat, you didn't even do anything yet. You didn't even open up your eyes and you're already not good enough. And that was really the message that I got from that. And that's been ingrained in me because again, I mean, I got into that world very young. And so that was the messaging that I got from. I can hear Bible teachers in my head saying that. Our pastor from our church would talk about that all the time. And so that was a really deep rooted belief rooted into my soul, really.
So that's, it's that seeding came from a dogma and an institution, institutionalized
Mm,
way of thinking that is not the way you are. That's
yeah.
not who you are. So now shuffle those 10 active love cards,
Okay.
and you're going to concentrate on picking one that will speak to you as to how you start or what it is you need to do. It's a transactional and energetic uh, energy transaction of energy. It's an action that you need to do here. So that's going to help you with this. So just pick one card.
Okay.
I mumble my way through that.
Let's see. I got the forgiveness and faith.
Hmm. Okay. So forgiveness and faith. Are you a It's going to sometimes say, if you are able to forgive the the people who seeded this within you,
Mm,
right? If you're unable to forgive, then pray for them,
mm,
and also pray for help
mm.
with the situation. But is forgiveness a possibility here, or how do you understand this card?
Yeah, when I see that, again, for our listeners who are on YouTube, there's this like angelic figure with her hand on somebody's head. But when I saw that picture, I envisioned myself as the angelic person putting my hand on the head of the person who told me those things. Because the way I've approached this topic and other places in my life is that I don't really think those people meant harm. I think that they were only operating out of what they
Mhm.
believed and what they were taught and what they understood, and they were just kind of passing it along. And I don't think that it was meant maliciously in any way. And so I think if I can look at that person and see myself in them, because I used to be that person as well. I taught those same things from the pulpit, but I've grown and I've evolved and I've changed, and then I can forgive them for the things that they taught me, and I can have the faith to release them from it because I can believe that everybody has the potential to evolve, whether it be in this life or in the next, whatever that might hold for us. But I believe that we can all evolve past the places where we are into something bigger and different. And so,
How does
um,
that make your heart feel, just even saying that?
yeah, so much better, so much better. Light. Yeah.
And there are, the reason that card was combined is there are certain situations where, let's face it, a victim cannot forgive their perpetrator.
Hmm.
So that's where the prayer comes in. That's
Mm,
when If you cannot, then, there's a visualization that you can just sort of
Mhm.
remove them, but pray for them, because throwing bad after bad does no good. It
Yeah.
doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help anything evolve.
Yep.
It locks in crisis and trauma, and basically you can't change them. All you
Yeah.
can do is change yourself and your
Yeah.
perspective, and lessen that burden.
So good. Tina, we are at the end of our time, but this where did the time go? Where did the time go? We had impromptu readings. Who knew we were gonna go this way? But thank you. I
Oh no, thank you. It was fun.
appreciate you taking the time for me. And real quick, where can people go to interact with your work online? Do you have a website, any place you want to point people to, or
I do. It's going to be under construction, but anyway, Tina at tinahart.ca. You can reach me there. tinahart.ca. That's my website. It's going to be under construction because you just keep, reinventing
sure,
yourself.
of course. That's what we do. That's what us
Doesn't
creative people do.
look like that anymore.
Right?
Anyway, so yes, that would be great. You can reach me there.
Awesome. Well, I'll put the links in the show notes and we will do this again sometime soon, I'm sure.
That'd be great. So great to meet you.
Awesome.
Take care.